9/11. A horrible time to remember of not only in New York, but worldwide. We always talk about the horrible thing that happened when it came to 9/11, but it brought our country together, not only in sports, but lives and really governmental. It wasn't about Republican or Democratic or liberal. It was all about coming together and being as one. I really think it was a terrible time, not only for families and people that lost loved ones, but it also brought us together as a nation. So it's something that you don't want to celebrate it, but you always want to remember it. September 11th was a horrible day, but it also let us know who we were as a country. So that's all I'm going to say about that. Definitely a horrible day, Saturday, 9/11. But moving forward, we expect our country to be even stronger than we ever have been. A little bit with baseball. The Mets and the Yankees this weekend. The Yankees not playing good baseball. They went from being the number one wild card seeded team. Now they have fallen to number 2. They have teams creeping up on them. Toronto playing as well as they have, just completely dominating the Yankees in the last series. As far as Oakland is concerned, Oakland's starting to play good baseball too. So this is a bad time for the Yankees to play the way they've played. But hopefully in this series against the New York Mets, it will change everything and get the Yankees back into normability. But the Yankees are 2-8 in the last 10 games, have completely fallen off, lost 6 in a row, which is ridiculous. You went from winning almost 13 in a row to falling to 6. And by the way, there's so many weaknesses with the Blue Jays. The Yankees should not have been swept by the Toronto Blue Jays. Steven Matz pitched a great game, Long Island native. And I think the Mets are going to give the Yankees a lot of problems because when the Mets play the Yankees, and being that it is in Citi Field, the Mets fans are going to be all over this game. And the Yankees do not want to fall out of a wild card spot and playing chase because how many games are left in this season? 78 and 62 the Yankees are.
There's 140 games they've played, so 22 left.
22 games left. The Yankees cannot fall out where they're 2 games, 3 games out of a wild card spot because then it's going to be chase. Even though the Yankees are still in that final wild card spot and they're only 1 game behind the Boston Red Sox, the Yankees need to keep the pace. Who are the Red Sox playing this weekend, by the way?
White Sox.
And I think the White Sox are a dangerous team, and they're playing good baseball as well. The White Sox are expected to win that division. I expect them to come strong at the Boston Red Sox. So hopefully the Red Sox fall a little bit behind in this series, and maybe the Yankees start picking up the pace and getting back to second place in the number 1 wild card team. They're definitely not winning the division. Tampa is completely stolen. I would be very surprised in 5 games that Tampa don't clinch that playoff spot in that number 1 seed in the American League East. But the Mets, I don't know what's going on with the Mets. The Mets are 5 games out of a wild card spot. They're actually 5 games away from Atlanta. I don't know where the Mets are or who the Mets are as a team. I will say this. Going into the offseason, the Mets are going to have to decide, 1, if their manager is going to stay their manager, and number 2, they need to find themselves a real GM. Sandy Alderson, I love the guy. He's a nice guy. How many times has he fought cancer and completely succeeded to beating that? But he is an old man. He's in his 70s. We all know about the Moneyball era. He was a big part of the Moneyball era. He is not the guy. And the guys that they chose in the offseason, they both failed. One doing what he was doing, sending pictures to ladies, and the other one can't drink and drive. This team needs to figure out where they're going and what is their strength and what is their weakness. Going into this series, they can really shut up the Yankee fans. They really could, because if they can sweep the Yankees or beat the Yankees 2 out of the 3 games, if they can beat the Yankees 2 out of 3, they can knock the Yankees out of the playoffs.
Yeah, it's one of those things where the Yankees historically have always done well in the Subway Series, but the Mets, when they do well, they tend to either sweep or they take 3 out of 4 or something. If they did the bunched up 2-game series, I think 2 years ago they swept the Yankees, and the Yankees, I think, still won the division, but they prevented them from the number 1 seed or something like that, where the Astros had home field in the playoffs. Like, they always do something to hurt them a little bit, no matter how good or bad the Mets actually are. But in terms of the Yankees, I think they'll be fine in the fact of they do well in bunches. Like, when they get hot, they're hot. When they get cold, they're cold. They've been the epitome of that team all year. So once they get hot again with the extra roster expansion, I think they will end up being fine. But there is some concerns. Obviously, their lineup, similar to the Mets in their recent cold stretch, their lineup depth has really been concerning. Now Judge and Stanton have even struggled, where that's a bad bad sign for them because usually they were the ones carrying them when the rest of the lineup was down, and that's a big concern for the Yankees. But again, with Oakland getting better now, they just took 2 from the White Sox. Toronto, could they stay hot this whole time? I'm not so sure. You're right. They're flawed. Their bullpen's really bad. Even though their bullpen's bad too, I think the Yankees will end up holding on. The question is, can they maybe one of them leapfrog the Red Sox too? Because I mentioned on the last Weekend Crunch, I worry about their roster depth in comparison to the Oakland Athletics, which have a good farm system, a lot of good young players. The Blue Jays, we know how good their young players are. And the Yankees, they've had new guys come along, like Luis Gil, like Andrew Dominguez, that have really created a spark for them at times. Now, they've obviously steamed out. We expected them. You can't expect them to stay hot forever, but you got to expect somebody else to pick it up. And I still think that could happen for the Yankees. And the Mets, I don't know what to expect out of them. They're the epitome of an average team. They win one close game, then they collapse in another close game. They've lost 2 close.
Like a pinball machine.
Yeah, they lost 2 walk-offs against the Marlins. I mean, that's a bad sign in itself. They're not hitting either. And granted, the Marlins starting pitching is pretty good. But
I think I would compare the Mets to ping pong. If you put some spin on the ball, you might be able to hit the other side. But the Mets, they put too much spin on the ball and it never even hit.
Yeah. The Mets bullpen puts too much spin on the ball and they throw wild pitches. That's what they do.
I don't know. But the Yankees schedule after the Mets, it get pretty easy. They play Minnesota in one game, a makeup game. Then they play Baltimore in a 3-game series. Cleveland, who the Yankees play very well against every single year. And then there's Texas, Boston, and Toronto. And I think that Toronto series is going to be a huge, huge series for the Yankees because that could be a make or break wild card finisher because next month they have 3 games against Tampa, and I think Tampa's going to sit a lot of their players, so the Yankees will have a chance to sweep the Tampa Bay Rays because they're going to clinch a playoff spot. So the Yankees are going to be able to position themselves, if they can keep up the pace, to be a playoff team.
Right now the Rays are 6.5 games up of the number 1 seed on the Astros, and they are 8 games up in full against the White Sox. So that's a good sign if they end up clinching the number 1 seed for them to be able to do that. They're going to probably end up being a lot of openers, a lot of younger pitchers that they maybe want to experiment with, and a lot of their top hitters that are also young players might not be playing in that. So that could be a good sign for the Yankees, too. Now, the other thing to look at, too, is both Oakland and also the Mariners, who are tied with the Athletics, too, both have easy series this week, and the Blue Jays get to play the Orioles. So this makes it extra crucial for the Yankees to take advantage against the Mets. Now, obviously, there could be some fluky things happening. The Mariners are a weird team that they lose to teams they shouldn't lose to, too. And the Athletics have had a lot of trouble late in games, too. So maybe some things could happen like that. Same thing with the Blue Jays. But still, that's not a good sign if you're the Yankees in terms of trying to hold their ground if they can't beat the Mets. Now, I still trust them because the Mets haven't hit. They haven't had a good bullpen. They've had their own struggles themselves, but they're still a better team on paper than the Orioles, the Diamondbacks, and the Rangers.
Yes, and I think with the Mets, I think the Mets are done. But I also believe that we can see some growth with this team, especially in the second half of September, because I think with their schedule and Pete Alonso and now this team actually healthy with Lindor and Baez, we can see what this team is, if they're going to keep this team together next year. Are they going to move on from Baez? This is so much of a lost season for the New York Mets because I think being that a lot of Met fans thought it was going to be a great year for them, that they were going to be a playoff team with their pitching staff completely fell apart. Syndergaard is probably done with the New York Mets. He will be a free agent in the offseason unless Steve Cohen decides, you know what, I'm going to re-sign this guy or give him a 1-year extension to see if he still has it in him. This guy hasn't been on the mound for 2 years. Now, I still think he'll stay in New York because I think the Yankees are a team that will be looking for another pitcher to add to that roster. Syndergaard is definitely a guy that has really sparked the Yankees over the years, so maybe a Noah Syndergaard going to the Yankees. I don't know. Maybe the Mets decide Steve Cohen has all the money in the world if they want to bring Syndergaard back. And what's going on with Jacob deGrom? Is he 100% healthy? What is going on when it comes to that arm? Really in position of what this team is going to be in the future. I have no idea what the thought is with that organization and where the Mets believe that this organization is moving forward, but definitely have to look at maybe bringing in a new manager.
The UCL sprain on deGrom is apparently fully healed now. It's just a matter of him getting those bullpen sessions, those rehab starts that they're going to test how good it is. And because deGrom also had other elbow inflammation, too, to go along with that. So they're going to play that by ear. I hope the Mets take it cautious with him, but knowing the Mets, they probably won't. And they're going to rush everybody back like they tend to do. And that's what worries me because the Mets are, as I mentioned many times, the most fragile team in all sports. So they'll probably mess it up in some capacity. In terms of Luis Rojas, he's been a little questionable in the second half of the season for sure. Now, again, some of it is with the injuries too. So much all at once that it could hinder the way he manages. And he's tried different things with the offensive depth they're supposed to have on paper and hasn't been hitting. So I don't know if he's necessarily the only problem. I think the problem is they have too many guys that are trying to pull the ball. They have an approach issue with guys that should be more of contact hitters and are trying to hit for power too much. You have guys like James McCann, who's been a top 10 offensive catcher the last 3 years, and he's been down this year. I think a lot of that is on the players, too. And if the Mets get a new GM, I don't think Rojas will be there. I think they'll find their own guy. But I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt for now. I don't think he's great. I don't think he's god-awful. He's like somewhere in between, which makes it a tough decision. I do think if they do end up actually hiring a real GM that doesn't have issues off the field and not know what they're doing, then they'll have a new manager too.
I think the Mets are going to be looking elsewhere when it comes to management, especially on the GM side and the coaching side. I think the Mets need to rebuild, and I think they're really on the cusp of being good. They're right there. They have to decide what they're doing. They have a great farm system, so why aren't these guys getting called up? That's something that I want to know, because I hear all these Met fans saying, oh, we've got some farm system. Look at what this guy did. Look at what that guy did, and look at the players that they have in AA and AAA. Where are these guys? Are they going to get called up? What's going to happen moving forward with this team? Are they going to make moves in the offseason where they're going to spend another $300-400 million? That is not the answer. The Steinbrenner way has never been the answer. And if Steve Cohen is going to slowly but surely bring that into the game again, it's going to affect not only the Mets as an organization, it's going to affect some of these players and young players that they want to call up in the future.
Yeah, you wonder, too, with a lot of the injuries that they've had, if some of these guys maybe aren't as ready as we thought. Maybe they don't want to put him in a wild card race right now.
At the end of the season, they're not making the playoffs.
I don't think they are either, but I still think they feel like they have a shot. Now, I think they'll end up finishing the season better than the Phillies, but I don't think they'll end up finishing the season better than the Braves. The Braves have been playing very well, patching things together with their young pitchers, with their bullpen playing better in the second half of the season. So I think they'll be fine in terms of winning the division. Whether they go far in the playoffs is another question, but we know they're a talented team. The Mets are kind of that in-between team where they have a lot of veteran guys that you want to see some more consistency out of. We thought they had more versatility in that bullpen. They don't. Same thing with the lineup. They have a good mixture, but none of those guys are playing well. A lot of those guys, Dominic Smith, Jeff McNeil, J.D. Davis, James McCann, they've all had down years all at once, and it hasn't really helped everything. And obviously the two supposed to be superstars, Lindor and Baez, they've had their woes too. So hopefully they bounce back at least for a year or two. I think they'll be fine if Baez is even still there. I hope they get him back, but I'm worried that he's going to drive his price tag up.